Welcome back to the channel, and we are done with the AFC and we are moving on to the NFC now. As if you want to see all the grades from the AFC side of things, they are up on the channel already, but as we move into a new conference, we will be doing the NFC South, and while the conference is different, the grading system stays the same, as each of the teams will fall into one of these tiers. Each of the picks will fall into one of those 5 color grades. On the right side, gold being amazing draft picks, green being picks that I like, white where most of the picks will fall under being pretty neutral, red being picks that I didn't like, and gray being absolute disasters, which not many got. Spoiler alert though, one pick did get it for one of these 4 teams in the division. I have a feeling we'll be getting to that one very shortly, as along with these grades, I will also be ranking all the draft classes relative to the rest of the league. And without any further ado, let's get into the very first team that we will be ranking, that being none other than the Atlanta Falcons, who not only were last in their division, but last in the entire NFL. I shouldn't need to explain too deeply why this was the worst draft class. This has been unanimously agreed upon by many of being one of, if not the worst draft class, and I haven't seen many people talk positively about it, and shockers, I won't have many positive things to say either. And we start with Michael Penix, who is getting that gray grade of a disastrous draft pick, and to no surprise, I think this was not only the worst pick of the draft, this is one of the worst draft picks I have seen in a very, very long time. And there are a lot of people now trying to play like this optimistic, like, oh, well, you know, Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles and you need a QB of the future, and I get all that, but 1, you don't take that player top 10. 2, you don't take that player in the type of situation you're in where you have a bunch of young players on cheap contracts, Kyle Pitts on a rookie deal, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, all these young players on rookie deals. And you don't take a player like Michael Penix just that high. It's not even just that. If you would have taken, say, JJ McCarthy, for example, I would have probably dinged you for the pick, but I wouldn't have said it was a disaster, because Michael Penix is just an old rookie who I had easily as QB6 in this draft class. I mean, like, I'm not a big Bo Nix guy, but Bo Nix is better. I'm not a big, you know, Jaden Daniels guy. Jaden Daniels is better. I'm not like saying that JJ McCarthy would have been an amazing pick, but JJ McCarthy is better, and better to sit and learn from Kirk Cousins. It's not just the position you took. It's not just where you took him. It's who you took. Michael Penix, I just don't think is a good player. I had a 3rd round grade at best on him. I wouldn't have considered him in round 2. And that's just me, I guess, being lower on Penix than a lot of other people. But even the biggest Michael Penix supporters haven't really been able to get behind this draft pick. And I just don't understand what the thought process is here, because Kirk Cousins, you'd think, is going to be on the Falcons as their quarterback 2-3 years. I mean, maybe he just falls off a cliff after next year, or maybe this year. Maybe he just falls off a cliff. Maybe they're anticipating something that we don't know. But conventionally, you'd expect at least another 2 solid seasons of Kirk Cousins. And by the time Michael Penix steps onto the field, at earliest, he's what, 26, 27? Could be 28 before he played. Like, and the interviews coming out saying, oh yeah, we're comfortable if Penix sits for 4 years. You're comfortable with a 28-year-old first-round pick quarterback not playing until he's almost 30? Like, I just don't understand the thought process. And rightfully, the pick has been destroyed on the internet, destroyed by analysts. It does not make any sense, because the Falcons had a real chance in what is a pretty weak division, and definitely a weaker conference overall, to really step up and like solidify themselves as a potential contender. As Kirk Cousins can take it to the playoffs, Bijan, I anticipate having a great second year. Drake London is really slept on. Kyle Pitts, I know he's been joked on, but Kyle Pitts is really good. There's a lot of nice players. They have Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guards in the league. They have a lot of nice pieces. AJ Terrell is nice. Jesse Bates is nice. They have real players, and this was a chance for them to get a real blue chip prospect, probably what I'd imagine to be their last top 10 pick for a few years. I don't see how you pass up the opportunity to take even just You could have taken Roma Dunze. You could have taken Byron Murphy. You could have taken a corner. You could have traded down. And I said this with the Titans in the previous video. The Titans had opportunities to trade down. The Falcons also had opportunities to trade down because reports coming out like crazy about teams trying to trade up ahead of the Bears for Roma Dunze. You had opportunities to trade down. You could have taken anybody else. You probably made the worst possible pick you could have even thought of making. And I can't help but say this is maybe like the worst draft pick I have ever seen a team make in my lifetime. But even still, if you go and you nail the rest of the draft, then hey, you got a couple of nice players and maybe you get a future quarterback. But that is not the case, and that is not what happened, because you reach in the second round. Ruka is... I like him. He was a solid day 2 player, but really? Third pick of the second round when Michael Hall, Chris Jenkins, guys I had much higher rated, Jerzon Newton, you took him over Jerzon Newton? Like, that is indefensible, indescribable, unfathomable. What are you doing with that draft pick? It's just like you took a solid rotation D lineman, and if you wanted to help the D line, there were and in my grading, at least 3 guys better. You took the 5th guy for my interior D-line rankings, and you took him at 35. Like, I just don't understand. Now, what I can say is it's not nearly as bad past the first 2 picks as Braylon Trice. I thought was a pretty solid addition, and Falcons every year just seem to be looking for an edge rusher, and they just can't seem to get one. But maybe Braylon Trice can be that guy. Brandon Dorless, I thought, was a much better value pick in addition for the interior defensive line, as he's also a nice rotational player. I thought, you know, the gap between Dorless and Ororo was closer between him and Jerzon Newton, who went literally right after. You could have taken Newton in the second round, and again, I don't want to turn this into you could have taken this guy, you could have taken this guy, but when the Falcons make these picks, it's like, man, there weren't just 1 or 2 better. There was like a dozen better players you could have taken in this position, and some at the position, some at other positions. It's just like, how do you make some of those decisions? Now, JD Bertrand, I thought was like fine 5th round pick. I don't like Jace McClellan, who they picked in the 6th round. I don't think he's really going to do a whole lot. I honestly, I don't even know if I anticipate him making the team, but considering they don't really have a number 3 running back, I guess he could. And then taking another interior D lineman and a receiver, it's whatever, but man, this is a poor draft class and a real missed opportunity from the Falcons, who I think had a real chance to compete and just whiffed. I really genuinely think just whiffed. There's a significant gap between the Falcons and the rest of the teams in their division as we jump all the way up to number 16 overall, the 3rd ranked team in the division, the New Orleans Saints, who I thought did, I mean, I put him at 16, perfectly just fine job. I overall thought it was just pretty nice because they go, and with the problems that they've had with Ryan Ramczyk, and who knows if Ryan Ramczyk will be okay. We hope he is, and we hope he can play again. But it had become a big problem when you're walking into next season with basically no one at right tackle, and Trevor Penning, who has shown to be a very poor selection at left tackle. So Fuaga's going to step in and immediately play no matter what. Even if they were in a situation where Ramczyk could play, Fuaga was probably going to start at guard pretty early on, but now they're probably going to try him out at right tackle. It solidifies a massive need on this offensive line for the Saints, and I have no complaints at all with the draft pick. It was the right move, and it was the right player, I feel like, who I think is going to help a lot and fortify the offensive line, whether it be at right tackle in the future or at guard. He could play a multitude of positions, but this offensive line rebuild is far from over from the Saints because, I mean, the rest of their line does look absolutely rough, and like I said, Trevor Penning has not panned out in the slightest. But my favorite pick that they made value-wise was Kool-Aid McKinstry in the 2nd round. I thought that's a phenomenal pick for the Saints, and it's crazy because the Saints really didn't like desperately need a corner or anything. They were doing just fine in the secondary, but I mean, Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore, and Alontae Taylor. Here's another one. Let's get Kool-Aid in there, who It's just a great pick. I thought he was a guy who could have went in the first round. He was my 22nd player rated in the entire class, I believe. So it is definitely great value and a player who I think fits the Saints very well. I love how the Saints play defense, and I love how they coach their secondary, and Kool-Aid's going to be a perfect fit for them. So not just value, but also fit. It is great all around. Now you may be wondering, well, why is this draft class rated maybe higher than some others? Because they didn't have a third or a fourth round pick. But I mean, again, like I said, with the Browns draft class, I'm not ranking you based on what you don't have and knocking you for not having certain picks. I'm grading you based off the picks that you do have and what you do with them. And you nail your first round pick, you nail your second round pick. Sure, you don't have a third and a fourth, but then you go in the fifth round, take Spencer Rattler, and there's a lot of split opinions on Rattler. I do think of any of the main 6 quarterbacks that everyone graded, Rattler does have the most upside and potential to be something. I don't think he's complete garbage like a lot of other people say, but I don't know if I really anticipate him doing much. But I do like the idea of just saying, hey, we took Jake Haener last year. We're going to take Spencer Rattler this year. We're going to keep pushing Derek Carr to just fend off all these people. And maybe if we just keep getting lucky, throwing picks at round 4 through 7, one of these guys will hit, and maybe we get ourselves a quarterback. Because I think if you're going to take a shot on one of them, Rattler's the one you take a shot on because he's got some tools to him. So can't really argue with the pick there either. Rest of day 3, though, pretty uneventful for the Saints as they go Bub Means at wide receiver, Jalen Ford at linebacker, Christian Boyd at D-tackle, and Josiah Ezram at tackle, who is already projected to be the backup tackle for Fuaga if he steps up to right tackle. They were really thin on the offensive line. I guess that's the only thing I can say is maybe instead of just kind of picking whatever in the 5th and 6th round, I would have probably just stocked up on the offensive line and just thrown a bunch of prayers hoping that one of these other guys can hit, because this team needs offensive line help and they need it bad. But like I said, nailed the first pick, nailed the second pick, got Spencer Rattler in day 3. Fine draft overall. I think it kind of fits right in, slotting at the middle of the pack of the NFL. Coming in just slightly above the Saints at number 2 in the division and number 14 overall is the Carolina Panthers, who I don't think are getting enough credit for what they did in not just the draft, but this offseason in general, as I think they have done a great job in going out and helping Bryce Young try to be successful now in the first round. They traded up 1 slot to go and select Xavier Legette, and while I do think there were a couple of better receivers on the board in my opinion, I can't fault them for taking the South Carolina kid who is a good fit in the offense and a good, player to have, as really Bryce Young just needed just about anyone to catch the football, and they went out, they traded for Deontay Johnson. They still have Adam Thielen. Jonathan Mingo was an absolute failure of a selection last year, and I think they're going to rectify it this year, as I do think Legette is going to be a much, much better player. But I really like Legette still, as this is just a really stacked receiver class. Legette was my 10th overall receiver. I still had, a guy I can comfortably take in round 2. This is just a really stacked receiver class, so while I like Legette, there's other people on the board that I had ahead of him, but still, it's really take your pick of what you need and what you want, and they wanted Legette, and I can't fault them for that. Then in the second round, I love this selection. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, as speaking of other, unsuccessful things, Miles Sanders has been a complete failure in Carolina, as well as Jonathan Mingo, and to rectify that, while Chuba Hubbard is not a bad player, he's definitely not, workhorse number 1, should be getting all the carries type of running back. Jonathan Brooks, I think, can easily emerge as the primary ball carrier as long as he is back healthy for training camp and the season, which I believe he will be. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to have a huge role in this offense and be a player who I think, like I said, if healthy, if good to go, if ready, can be an 1,000-yard player for the Panthers in year 1 even. And I mean, I guess same could go for Xavier Legette too, because again, I mean, the receiving core isn't anything crazy, but I think off the bat, you've gotten yourself 2 impactful offensive players to help Bryce Young. And these 2 players, I think, are better than any player that they had last year, as Adam Thielen, while he was productive, was not anything great. I mean, he really was just the only receiver who knew how to catch a football or get even an ounce of separation, even though it wasn't all that much. So I think these two players give this team some much needed explosiveness, some youth, some just anything, because it was just tough to watch the Panthers. A lot of people wanted to write Bryce Young off as a bust immediately, but man, if you watch the situation he was playing in, it was impossible to succeed. So I really love that they went out, got an offensive guy in Dave Canales, who I'm a fan of, went out first round receiver, went out second round running back. But where I want to talk about next is fourth round. You go tight end Jatavian Sanders, who I think is an absolute gem of a find in the fourth round. I mean, Sanders was a lot of people's number 2 tight end. He was mine as well. A lot of people also did sour on him, but I think for Sanders, again, exactly what Bryce Young needs, just someone who you can rely on. I think Sanders has probably the best hands in this draft, as while he isn't, super dynamic or explosive, he's not anything crazy as an athlete, and it's going to be very much, can he develop a connection with Bryce Young? I think Jatavian Sanders was a player who was very dependent on not just the team or scheme he went to, but what quarterback he went to, and if he can develop a chemistry with him, because I think where Sanders thrives is having the chemistry with the quarterback to find those kind of open little holes and zones and kind of slip his way through, where even though he's not the most gifted route runner or athlete, he just kind of finds a way to get open. And then obviously with those great hands, he's going to reel the ball in. So I think it's a great, 3 players that you got to help Bryce Young. And that really was what this draft class was all about, which is why I kind of, praise them a bit higher than I would for, the Saints or a couple of other teams in this area, is because you needed to make sure Bryce Young had every opportunity to succeed. And you spent 3 of your first 4 picks on that. 1 receiver, 1 tight end, 1 running back. You took Trevin Wallace in the 3rd round, who was a fine pick. I mean, Shaq Thompson has seemingly been in Carolina for decades. It feels like he's eventually going to have to move on and go somewhere else. So getting a replacement plan for Shaq Thompson is long overdue. And then in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, you took, backup corner, backup linebacker, backup D tackle. I think that was the way to go. Spend your premium picks on offense, spend your late picks on, filling out the rest of your roster on defense and getting depth. I think the Panthers went about their draft the exact way that they should. And I don't really know why people are knocking them. Maybe you can disagree with who they took. I mean, I can say that Leggett, while he wasn't the number 1 receiver on my board at the time, was still a good pick. I can say, well, Jonathan Brooks, while I prefer, a guy like Trey Benson, I can't knock Jonathan Brooks being the pick. I don't really know why people aren't really saying, man, Jatavian Sanders is a great pick, because it's a great pick. Even if you're not high on him, getting him in the 4th round, absolutely amazing value. And I credit what the Panthers have done to help Bryce Young. And coming in at number 1 in the division and just number 13 overall, as all these top 3 teams ranked pretty closely together within the division and within the entire NFL, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had a draft that I just really, really liked. As we start at the top with Graham Barton going in the 1st round, and Graham Barton is just a perfect pick. I mean, it's nothing you can really say to knock this. Graham Barton's a really nice player, really rock solid player, going to be good. The team has needed more offensive line help, as Tristan Wirfs has been kind of fighting for his life, being the only competent human being on that offense. As I haven't really liked what they did in years past, taking Luke Godecki and Cody Mauch in previous years. I didn't really think they were amazing picks, but sure, they finally got someone who I think can legitimately be a good quality starter. Good value as well, as he hovered around my 17th best player, I believe, something like that. He was pretty high up, so getting him in at 26 was pretty good. Now, I will say I wasn't as big of a fan of the Chris Braswell pick. I was tempted to give it red, but I held back and just gave it neutral. But if I had to say, I didn't like it more than I did like it. So it's closer to red than it is to green. I'm not big on Braswell, and I do think it is a bit of a reach, but I can understand wanting to get more pass rush depth. They hit on Yaya Diaby last year, getting themselves a solid player, and they have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who's, again, just another solid player, not really anyone in the edge rush rotation that is a clear number one, but I think there were better options potentially on the board, not just at edge, but just once the top couple of edges went off the board, there was really just a clear drop off. And for me also, I'm a big Jonah Ellis guy, and you passed over Jonah Ellis for this guy, and it's like, man, don't want to turn this into who you could have picked, but just not a Braswell guy. But a pick and a player I absolutely do love is safety Tyke Smith. He was my number one safety on my board, and honestly, I had him graded very highly. I put him in my top 40, as I really love what Tyke Smith brings, as I think he straight up is a better like nickel option. If you want to just throw him into the nickel day one, he's a better nickel option, I think, than Mike Sanderstill, who went higher than him. I think he also has the potential of just being a straight up good safety if you're not even going to play him at nickel, because he is more than capable of playing safety. There are a lot of people who come in where their position is listed at safety, but they really just played nickel corner their whole career. He played safety as well at Georgia, and he can play. And when I look at their secondary now with him and Antoine Winfield, it's probably going to be, if they do line him up primarily at safety, my favorite safety duo in the league. I absolutely love getting Tyke Smith, and this was a team that did need secondary help after trading away Carlton Davis, so I think it is a perfect pick, definitely their best value pick of the draft, and one of my favorite picks just overall, just because of how big of a fan I am of Tyke Smith. Another player I am a massive fan of is Jalen McMillan, who I am more than happy to see go in day 2. I was wondering if he was going to be able to slide into round 3. I was worried he might fall, but McMillan is a player who I think went into a good situation, for one, because he was able to thrive at Washington when he had Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk on either side. Now he's going to Tampa Bay, where he's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I did think this was a team that did need a receiver, because their number 3 guy currently listed was Trey Palmer, and they had basically no one else past Evans and Godwin. So I think he can immediately slot in as their number 3. And he's just an awesome player who was kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit because of the Rome hype. And then I do think he's better than Jalen Polk. So I think that they got the better Washington receiver between them and the Patriots. And then on top of that, his best tape did not come from this past year, where he was, coming off an injury and playing through it and everything. But if you look at his tape from the year before, it is strong. And I think if Jalen McMillan would have put up similar tape to the year he did before the injury, he would have been drafted even higher. So I think you're getting really good value here in the 3rd round, even though this is maybe around the place where a lot of people may have thought he would go. I think this is a good value for him, and I wouldn't have been mad if he got taken even earlier in the 3rd round. But I love the Jalen McMillan pick for Tampa Bay especially. I don't often give out red picks to day 3 players, but while I try not to knock teams for taking, just whoever they want in the late rounds, it's very scheme dependent and who they like. I just kind of wanted to put this out here on Bucky Irving. I'm not a big fan of Bucky Irving at all. He barely was a top 10 running back for me, and I think maybe even then I was being a bit generous with him. But overall, he has obviously the highlight juke moves, and he makes people miss. But for me, he doesn't have the ability to ever be like a starting running back with his, size and, ability. And then if you're projecting him maybe as a 3rd down back, which I've seen a lot of people trying to do, I don't think he's a great pass catcher of the football, nor is he obviously a good pass blocker. When it comes to Bucky Irving and you get him in the open field, there's a good chance he's going to make you miss. But my problem with that is I don't think he's going to get in that situation all that often. I don't think he's going to get into the 2nd level and get past the defenders to the point where he can be in an opportunity to be one-on-one in the open field and make that guy miss. Obviously when he's, running in those big holes in college, it's a lot easier for him to get to the 2nd level, juke out a safety, juke out a corner, or whoever. But it's going to be a lot harder in the NFL to get those types of spaces and those open holes to run through. And I just don't think it's going to be there for Bucky Irving. On top of that, like I said, I don't think he's anything crazy as a receiver. For me, I think his absolute ceiling is maybe like a J.D. McKissick type. But that's if he can develop as a pass catcher, and even then, If you're getting JD McKissic in the 4th round, solid, I guess, but I don't foresee even that being the case. I'm just not a big Bucky Irving guy at all. They also did take a guard and a tight end in round 6 and 7. Devin Culp is going to have to, fight to be the number 3 tight end on the roster, so we don't know if he'll make the roster. And Elijah Klein will probably make it if he can beat out a couple of the other just whoever guys at guard. They have a lot of just revolving door of practice squad players, it feels like, as their backup offensive lineman, so he'll have every opportunity to make the roster. But overall, I like what the Buccaneers did. Graham Barton's a really nice pick. Not big on Braswell, but I can see it working out if they want to just build out a nice edge rotation. Love Tyke Smith. Big fan of Jalen McMillan. And I'm not a big Bucky Irving guy, but I can understand the need of another running back. So while I do knock the pick, I understand taking a running back. That'll do it for the video, and let me know what you all think, agree, disagree. If you are a fan of the Buccaneers draft like I am, and especially Tyke Smith, you can let me know. And let me know what you think of what the Panthers were able to do in getting the weapons for Bryce Young, and if that will really help Bryce Young kind of shake off the bust label that has already been put on him a little too harshly, I feel like, early on in his career. But I will see you all in the next one.